You know what is strangely exhausting?
Finishing a conversation hours ago and somehow still being in it. You leave the room, you put your phone down, you try to move on with your day, and then, out of nowhere, your mind reopens the scene like a private theater. You replay what you said, you replay what they said, you test new versions, better versions, safer versions, sharper versions. You imagine explaining yourself more clearly, defending yourself more confidently, being funnier, calmer, less awkward, less emotional, more impressive, and sometimes the conversation never even happened in the first place. It is tomorrow's conversation, next week's confrontation, a tiny social moment that your brain has decided needs a full rehearsal, a backup rehearsal, and then one more just in case. Why do we do this? Why does the mind spend so much energy on imaginary dialogue? Why do ordinary people, intelligent people, socially capable people, people who know better, still find themselves standing in the shower, arguing with someone who is not there? At first glance, it can look like overthinking, and sometimes it is. It can look like anxiety, and often, lo lang is part of it. It can feel like a weird habit, one of those private behaviors that everyone assumes is uniquely theirs until they realize most people do some version of the same thing. But the hidden reason you rehearse conversations in your head is not just that you worry too much, or that you are socially awkward, or that your self-esteem is secretly broken. The deeper explanation is far more interesting. Your mind is not merely replaying words, it is trying to protect your social survival. And that sounds dramatic until you remember something very basic about human psychology. For most of our history, being accepted by other people was not a bonus, it was safety. It was food, protection, cooperation, belonging, and identity. To be misunderstood, rejected, embarrassed, excluded, or shamed by the group was never just emotionally uncomfortable. It could carry real consequences. So the human brain evolved to treat social situations with unusual seriousness. That is why a 5-minute conversation can linger in your system longer than a physical inconvenience. That is why a vague text can trigger more emotional activity than an actual problem. That is why your name appearing in a group chat can change your heartbeat before you have even read the message. The mind does not treat social uncertainty like trivia. It treats it like a possible threat, and rehearsal is one of the ways it tries to manage that threat. In psychology, there is a useful idea sometimes called mental simulation. This is the brain's ability to run possible scenarios before they happen, or revisit scenarios after they happen, in order to learn, predict, and prepare. It is one of the most intelligent things the human mind can do. Athletes use it, speakers use it, surgeons use it. You use it every time you picture yourself walking into a room and imagine what might happen next. So when you rehearse a conversation in your head, your brain may be doing something very normal. It is simulating. It is asking, what did that mean? What should I have said? What are the signs I missed? What might happen if this comes up again? How do I avoid looking foolish, weak, rude, needy, boring, or wrong? In other words, your thoughts are often trying to help. They are clumsy sometimes, repetitive, yes, a little dramatic, definitely. But beneath the loop is usually an attempt at self-protection. This becomes even clearer when you notice which conversations your brain tends to rehearse. It is rarely the perfectly smooth exchange at the grocery store. It is the moment with emotional charge, the ambiguous comment, the delayed reply, the interaction where your status, your belonging, your image, or your relationship felt uncertain. That is important. The mind usually does not obsess over what feels finished. It circles what feels unresolved. And unresolved social experiences are especially powerful because the human brain hates ambiguity. Research in social cognition has shown that people are deeply motivated to understand the intentions of others. We are constantly interpreting expressions, tone, pauses, and tiny shifts in behavior. We look for hidden meaning even when none was intended. That does not mean people are irrational. It means we are social creatures trying to read a complicated environment with incomplete information. When someone says, it's fine, was it actually fine? When someone goes quiet, are they tired, distracted, disappointed, offended, or simply thinking? When you tell a story and the other person gives a polite smile, did they enjoy it, judge it, or barely notice it? Your mind rehearses because it is trying to solve a mystery, and the mystery is not really language, it is social meaning. This is where a lot of people misunderstand their own behavior. They think, I keep
replaying this because I'm too sensitive.
or I'm doing this because I need to stop being so insecure. But often, the mind is responding to something real, uncertainty, a gap in clarity, a small rupture in connection, a possibility, however slight, that something important happened and you do not yet understand it. So you think through the conversation again. You zoom in on details, you change your lines, you test outcomes, you imagine their reaction, you imagine your response to their reaction, then your response to that response. At some point, it starts to feel absurd, but your brain is still following its own logic. It is searching for control in a place where control is limited, and that is one of the hidden reasons this habit becomes so sticky. Conversation is one of the most unpredictable things humans do. You can prepare facts, but not tone. You can prepare words, but not timing. You can plan confidence, but not chemistry. Another person brings their own mood, memory, bias, defenses, insecurities, and expectations into the exchange, which means social interaction is always partly uncontrollable. For the brain, especially a brain that dislikes uncertainty, that can be deeply uncomfortable. So rehearsal creates the feeling of control. If I think this through enough, maybe I can prevent embarrassment. If I find the perfect wording, maybe they will understand me. If I anticipate every possible reaction, maybe I will not be caught off guard. If I rewrite the past carefully enough, maybe I can undo the discomfort I still feel. That last one is particularly painful because, of course, you cannot redo the past. But the mind does not always operate according to what is logically useful. Sometimes it operates according to emotional urgency, and emotional urgency says, fix it, explain it, finish it, resolve it. This is also why people often rehearse conversations more intensely after conflict, rejection, or shame. Shame is one of the strongest social emotions because it attacks not just what you did, but who you are. It tells you that you were too much, not enough, inappropriate, exposed, foolish, needy, weak, unlikable. Whether that message is true or not, the nervous system reacts as if something important has been threatened. So the mind responds with analysis. What happened? How did they see me? What should I have said? How do I prevent that feeling next time? Seen this way, rehearsing conversations is not random. It is the mind's attempt to repair a social wound, preserve self-worth, and prevent future pain. But there is another layer to this that makes the behavior even more understandable. A lot of the conversations we rehearse are not just about communication, they are about identity. Think about the moments your brain keeps returning to. Often, they involve a version of yourself that you wanted to protect: competent you, kind you, attractive you, smart you, easygoing you, strong you, morally good you. The version of you that makes sense to you, the version you hope makes sense to other people. When an interaction threatens that image, even slightly, the mind lights up. Maybe you stumbled over your words and suddenly felt less intelligent. Maybe you sounded emotional and now worry you seemed unstable. Maybe you tried to be funny and it did not land. Maybe you wanted to set a boundary and instead became overly agreeable. Maybe you stayed silent and later imagined a stronger version of yourself saying exactly what needed to be said. In all of these cases, the rehearsal is not only about the conversation, it is about restoring coherence between your outer behavior and your inner self-concept. Psychology has long recognized that people are motivated to preserve a consistent sense of self. When reality clashes with identity, tension appears. You feel it as discomfort, rumination, self-consciousness, or the strange urge to mentally rewrite the scene. Your brain is trying to close the gap between who you believe you are and how you fear you came across. That is why some people rehearse arguments they never intend to have, not because they love conflict, but because in the privacy of imagination, they get to reclaim the self that felt muted in real life. They get to be articulate, brave, clear, and impossible to dismiss. They get to restore dignity. And sometimes that imaginary conversation is doing emotional work that reality never allowed. This matters especially for people who grew up in environments where speaking openly did not feel safe. If you learned early that expressing needs led to criticism, dismissal, tension, or withdrawal, your nervous system may have adapted by becoming highly vigilant in communication. You may over-prepare, you may over-explain, you may replay every interaction afterward looking for danger signs, not because you are broken, but because your psychology learned that social moments carry consequences. Attachment theory helps explain some of this. People who experienced inconsistent emotional responses early in life can become especially sensitive to ambiguity in relationships. A delayed text, a cooler tone, a shorter reply, these things may not register as neutral. They may feel loaded. The mind then rehearses conversations to find certainty, to predict outcomes, to avoid abandonment, or to prepare for emotional shifts before they happen. Someone else, perhaps with a different experience, might shrug off the same interaction completely. This is why the same behavior can have different hidden reasons in different people. For one person, rehearsing conversations is mostly performance optimization. They want to be precise, effective, and socially skilled. For another, it is conflict prevention. They want to avoid saying the wrong thing. For another, it is emotional repair. They are trying to soothe the sting of embarrassment or rejection. For another, it is a sign of high social intelligence mixed with high sensitivity. They notice subtle cues, pick up nuance, and then have trouble turning that awareness off. And for some people, especially those who are more Humsnoit, thoughtful, or naturally reflective, internal rehearsal is just part of how they process life. They think before speaking, they think after speaking, they use private language to organize emotional experience. That is not always a problem. It is sometimes a characteristic of a deep inner world. This is where nuance matters, because rehearsing conversations in your head is not automatically unhealthy. In moderate form, it can improve communication. It can help you clarify what you feel, prepare for difficult situations, and understand your own patterns. It can make you more deliberate, less reactive, more self-aware. Some of the most emotionally intelligent people you know likely do this all the time. They just do it in a way that leads somewhere. The problem begins when rehearsal stops being preparation and becomes imprisonment. You know the difference by how it feels. Preparation usually creates clarity. Rumination creates depletion. Preparation ends. Rumination loops. Preparation helps you act. Rumination keeps you stuck in thought. Preparation says, here is what matters. Rumination says, keep searching. There must be a perfect answer hidden in the 10th replay. That endless search for the perfect answer is another secret engine behind this habit. Human beings are vulnerable to what psychologists call counterfactual thinking, mentally constructing alternatives to what already happened. If only I had said this. If only I had paused. If only I had not smiled there. If only I had answered differently. This kind of thinking can be useful in small doses because it helps us learn, but under stress, it becomes a trap. It creates the illusion that there was one flawless line that would have fixed everything. Usually, there was not. Most conversations are not won or lost by one sentence. They unfold through history, context, tone, timing, and the other person's own psychology. But the mind likes neat explanations. It would rather believe one better response could have solved the problem than accept a harder truth. Sometimes social outcomes are messy because people are messy, and that can be a difficult thing to accept, especially if you are conscientious, especially if you are why me of yourself, especially if your self-esteem is tied to being understood, competent, or emotionally in control, especially if you grew up believing that if something went wrong socially, it must mean you failed to manage it correctly. That belief creates a brutal kind of hyper-responsibility. You begin to assume every awkward silence means you should have handled it better. Every misunderstanding means you explained badly. Every shift in mood means you caused it. Every difficult conversation becomes a performance review of your character. Under those conditions, of course, you rehearse. Your mind thinks it is trying to save you from future pain. It believes more analysis equals more safety. But there is one more hidden reason this happens, and it might be the most human one of all. Sometimes you rehearse conversations because there are things you cannot say out loud. Not safely, not yet, not to them, maybe not even fully to yourself. So the mind creates an internal stage where the forbidden script can finally speak. The anger you swallowed, the boundary you softened, the grief you disguised, the affection you hid, the apology you needed, the truth you edited because you were afraid of its consequences. In your head, the conversation becomes a place where the self can continue existing beyond social constraint. It becomes unfinished emotional business seeking language. That is why these mental dialogues can feel oddly intense. You are not just rearranging words, you are giving form to feelings that did not get to complete themselves in real time. And this is also why the habit often gets stronger during periods of loneliness, major change, unresolved conflict, or emotional isolation. When people do not feel fully seen in real life, the mind may compensate by turning inward. It creates dialogue as a substitute for closure, expression, or connection. That does not mean you are strange. It means your inner life is trying to metabolize experience with the tools available. There is something almost tender about that, even if it is exhausting, because underneath all the loops, the mind is often asking for one simple thing: help me understand what happened to me. That question sits beneath a surprising number of human habits. Why do I keep thinking about this? Why can't I let it go? Why did that small moment hit me so hard? Why do ordinary social situations leave such a large emotional footprint? And psychology gives a compassionate answer. Because human beings are not designed to treat relationships lightly. Because memory gives emotional priority to unresolved experiences. Because the brain rehearses what feels important. Because social pain activates many of the same alarm systems as physical pain. Because belonging matters. Because identity matters. Because being understood matters. Because your mind would rather loop than ignore something it believes could affect your safety, your value, or your place among other people. Once you understand that, the habit can start to feel less like a bizarre flaw and more like a meaningful signal, a signal that something felt uncertain, a signal that a part of you wanted protection, a signal that your nervous system stayed activated, a signal that maybe there is an emotion underneath the thought loop that has not yet been named, and naming it changes everything. Sometimes the real issue is not, what should I have said? It is, I felt dismissed, I felt embarrassed, I felt invisible, I felt threatened, I felt like I became a smaller version of myself, I felt afraid they would misunderstand me, I felt a very old kind of loneliness. When you shift from scripting the conversation to identifying the feeling, you move from endless simulation to actual understanding. That is where healing begins, not in finding the perfect comeback, not in finally winning the imaginary argument, not in constructing a socially flawless version of yourself, but in understanding what your mind has been trying to do for you all along. It has been trying to anticipate pain, protect connection, defend identity, recover dignity, create meaning from ambiguity, and repair emotional experiences that felt unfinished. That does not mean you should obey every thought your brain produces. Some rehearsals are useful, some are just stress wearing the mask of problem solving. The challenge is learning to tell the difference. A simple question can help. Is this thought moving me toward clarity or just deeper into the maze? If it is moving you toward clarity, write down what matters. What am I actually feeling? What do I need? Is there a real conversation that needs to happen? Is there a boundary, an apology, a clarification, or a decision hiding beneath the loop? If it is pulling you deeper into the maze, then the mind may not need more analysis. It may need reassurance, rest, perspective, sometimes even grief, because not every conversation can be fixed by language. Some can only be released by accepting that they touched something vulnerable in you, and vulnerability is not weakness. It is evidence that the moment mattered. Maybe that is the strangest part of all this. The habit we often judge as embarrassing or irrational can actually reveal something intelligent and deeply human. It reveals that your mind tracks meaning, that your emotions are paying attention, that your inner world is active, protective, and trying, however imperfectly, to keep you connected to other people and to yourself. So the next time you catch yourself rehearsing a conversation in your head, you do not have to immediately shame yourself for it. Pause for a second. Ask what your mind thinks it is protecting. Ask what felt unresolved. Ask whether this is about language or about fear, about strategy or about self-worth, about the future, or about an older wound that the present moment happened to touch. Because once you understand the hidden reason, the habit starts to look different. It is not just overthinking. It is psychology. It is memory. It is social survival. It is emotion trying to become coherent. It is the mind practicing for a world where words can wound, connect, repair, reveal, and reshape who we are to one another. And maybe that is why these invisible conversations can feel so real, because in a way, they are real. They are where your private self tries to make sense of your public life. They are where fear and intelligence meet, where low lung borrows the language of preparation, where the need for belonging disguises itself as analysis, where the parts of you that just still want to be understood keep searching for a better sentence. Not always because a better sentence exists, but because somewhere inside, you still hope that if the right words are found, the experience itself might finally make sense. And sometimes, understanding that hope is more important than finishing the script.